It's I'm Albright with an SCN special. With me today is Mr. Ray Lacey from Matrox talking about IP KVM. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Ray is a regional a U.S. Sales rep here in the States. Ray, I want to talk for a second about this. When we first started talking with you folks at Matrox, one of the things that you guys have done in the last couple of years is video distribution, obviously, video cards and a lot of production here. The thing about KVM, and I'm going to start very slowly here. First and foremost, if somebody's not familiar with what first of all, the acronym KVM stands for, what does KVM stand for in your guys' world, and how does it is AV involved in that signal distribution?
Sure. So KVM just simply stands for keyboard, video, and mouse. And when it originally came out, it was really just a way that you could have a single keyboard, mouse, and monitor to access multiple computers. And when it originally came out, it was just you had two systems and you wanted to use just one set of equipment to access both systems to toggle back and forth. It's evolved a lot over the years, but at its core, it's always been about video distribution and being able to manipulate exactly where your command and control is at any given time. So just one user could sit down and switch between the different workstations that they need to work on.
All right. Now, talk for a second about that base technology, right? That base idea, and how that's kind of evolved and actually become a little bit more important in the age of COVID, in the age of social distancing, and during this pandemic for the last 12, 13 months.
Yeah, so I mean, KVM's evolved a lot over the years. It's not a brand new technology, but the applications and how we use it have definitely evolved. It moved from being just a little unit that would sit on your desk to these giant switches where you would have user stations and you would have transmitters, and you had to build these really complex environments to where now we have a more IP-based solution. And that's really the way that it's gone. And it also started as more of a way to go in and get administrative access. So it might be a little laggy, there might be some delay, but it got you where you needed to go in a secure fashion. And now it's moved into a more, again, network architecture where it's as flexible as you need it to be. And it's also, real-time performance, sub 50 millisecond. So it's actually imperceivable to the user in a lot of cases. So you mentioned COVID. So with COVID, it really did introduce a couple of new challenges. We used to have a lot of people would have one central workstation, especially in a NOC, a network operations center, where you might have a user sit down and have access to your entire environment. But for obvious reasons nowadays, you don't want a single point of access into the entire system. So KVM allows you to have individual receivers so that you can just sit down at your own individual desk. If you still want to have a central method, or you need to move somebody out of that NOC or that data center into a secure location, you can have a flexible remote, secondary setup very, very easily because it's all just tying back in through your network.
So let me ask you this, because you mentioned the IP infrastructure, and I want to get to that in a second. Obviously, IP, you're talking about sending the video as well as the keyboard and the mouse commands back and forth. What was this infrastructure beforehand, right? If somebody's not familiar with KVMs, what was the infrastructure before we moved over to IP?
Yeah, so again, traditional is just one box where you can switch between two different systems. That evolved into matrix switches, these really big devices that look like network switches, where you could hook up transmitters and receivers, however many you happen to need. But beyond that, once we move into IP KVM, you get newer solutions like our Extio 3 solution. And Extio 3 is a 1 gig solution, so that's also important because with those low bit rates also come expanded functionality, such as WAN, such as aggregator mode, such as tile view, just really these advanced features that we can now do because we have a flexible platform in IP KVM, and then we have newer solutions like Extio 3 that can really take advantage of newer network infrastructure and those really low bit rates that we've been able to achieve.
Talk for a second about some of the best practices. You mentioned the evolution to multiple, encoders and decoders or transmitters and receivers. From your guys' standpoint or your standpoint, Ray, what is the best practice when it comes to deploying a large number of endpoints in a KVM system?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different, really good best practices. One is just understand your network infrastructure in the first place, understand, the limitations you might have, understand that you can set up a completely second network. You don't have to put everything on production. You can have everything on a network that is completely outside of where your email and your internet traffic is going. So you're going to have, the bandwidth that you need when you need it. You just need to know how many users need to have access, if those users are going to share access, if you have critical machines that you need to add. And then you go in through the normal steps of securing, this type of hardware like you would any kind of IP infrastructure. So you get into permissioning, you get into, encryption, you get into just kind of all those general things that you need to know about when deploying an IP network or a solution on an IP network.
Yeah. You mentioned NOC, Network Operations Center. A lot of these are in government facilities that none of us will ever see, but they are very, very highly secure systems here. One of the areas that those folks and the incredible men and women that serve in those areas are concerned about are the signal integrity, meaning that a bad actor can't come in and splice in and kind of basically steal off or copy or interrupt that signal. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys see when it comes to securing those KVM signals on the network?
Yeah, I mean, again, you really just want to follow your best practices when it comes to any kind of device that you're going to attach to your network. So among those are, you want to make sure you have up-to-date passwords. So you absolutely can have default local credentials, or you can do tie-ins with things like Active Directory. You can go in and actually encrypt the signal. So they're all encrypted by default. It's going to be HTTPS, so it's going to be secure. If you already have segregated your networks, again, we strongly recommend that. It's best practice in the industry to have a separate network for this type of infrastructure. So if somebody does gain access to your KVM network, all they're getting access to is additional KVM units. And while that might sound somewhat scary on the face of it, you first have to crack network encryption, crack our encryption, and then once you get that signal, it's still our proprietary signal that you would have to additionally break into. So in a lot of ways, it can be even more secure than traditional KVM methods because of all the different layers of security that are built in.
One of the areas that engineers will run into is making sure that they have that security and the integrity. If you're talking to a systems engineer right now, an AV systems engineer, what can they do when they're designing the system to make sure that the integrity of the KVM signal is maintained? Is it those security methods? Is it keeping that separate, or are there any other additional steps?
I mean, really just user permissioning. There's permissioning of the actual hardware itself. So you brought up, government installations. That's absolutely one of our primary users. So one of the abilities that we give people through Extio Central Manager, which is our management software platform, is you can go appliance by appliance, whether that's a transmitter or a receiver, or as you said, an encoder and decoder, because they're essentially the same thing, just different names for the same thing. But you can actually go in and restrict USB access at the port level. So in addition to network security, there's also even just physical security on the box itself. And beyond USB turning it on and off, you can even do a whitelist. So you have the ability to go in and tell, again, the entire environment, accept these types of USB devices and just outright decline these types of USB devices. So in addition to network security, there's also physical security. And on the network side, it's important to stress that it's really nothing all that proprietary. It's very, very similar to securing any type of a server or a firewall or any type of, a SCN, any kind of network device that you would have. It's just really the same type of steps.
Well, it also sounds like an awful lot. It sounds an awful lot like as they're deploying any sort of security. These are conversations you're having with the client, right? These are ongoing conversations, and I think one of the things that integrators should take away from this, at least, is this demonstrates your not only your proficiency in security, but also your concern for the client and their network, regardless of whether it's a government facility or not. You're at least saying, hey, not only am I a qualified systems engineer here that is concerned, but I'm also demonstrating my concern for you and for the safety of your network as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We try to follow industry best practices. We know that this is a newer piece of technology that is being adopted. Again, while KVM is not new, and even IP KVM is not new, we know that we need to stay with just industry standards that are very easy for the greater IT organization to implement. Because at the end of the day, AV and IT might not be the exact same department. They might be different kind of subcategories under the same organization. And you need to be able to walk up to the IT group, especially the network team, and say, hey, these are discoverable by DHCP. We use this type of encryption. Just really go in and show them this is going to be really easy to implement and easy to secure. And again, things like Active Directory integration makes it where you don't have to have a whole different set of credentials for all of your users. They can just use the exact same credentials that they're using every day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We mentioned the fact that this is, something that you guys are really, really familiar with, especially the video. You've got a lot of history with the K and the M, obviously. In what way can Matrox help integrators with the deployment of these systems to save time, to save money, and to save some complexity in deploying these systems?
Yeah, so we offer Extio Central Manager, and that is a piece of software that can live on a physical server that's on the same KVM network or a virtual server. We know a lot of people have gone, to some great tools that are out there to virtualize some of their infrastructure. It's a very lightweight piece of software that can be installed, and then the real benefit of that is it can auto-discover our different pieces of hardware on that network. You can push out mass firmware upgrades, so all you have to do is upload our firmware to the piece of software, and then it can handle, distributing that to all of the hardware downstream. We also offer device monitoring, so you can see what's active, what's not active, if something's offline, if a cable is loose, even a firmware mismatch between a transmitter and a receiver, which can sometimes cause a problem, depending on the deployment. So that lightweight piece of software makes it where it's very easy to deploy, easy to maintain, and see what's going on in the environment.
So just as a former tech manager, I love the fact that number one, it monitors the firmware, right, and has that mismatch, but also you can deploy all the firmware at once. That is it really is fantastic, guys.
Yeah.
All right, seriously, no, because I mean, good Lord, even 5 years ago, probably, 7, 8 years ago, let's say, you were still walking from classroom to classroom, from location to location, and with a USB
Right.
stick, right? And a number of button pushes depending on the piece of equipment, and having a network device that really does monitor and maintain, the firmware as well as monitoring when something goes offline. That's a huge time saver, especially when you're troubleshooting and you're sitting at the
Right.
help desk, and your facility, the person having the issue may be a building or two away. You have no idea. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, and especially with some newer features, such as our access over internet. So we can now even achieve this IP connectivity over over public internet, or over WAN, or between different LANs, through different VPN tools. And because we do have such a low bit rate, it's a very flexible platform. And because of that, we've been able to enable some new features to make it where deployment's easier than ever, but also working really from about anywhere is easier than ever. And that really goes back to the COVID story of what happens if you need a very technical resource or a very specialized resource, but they either can't come in, or maybe they don't even work in the same state. Maybe they work in a different office, within the same organization. And you can now use these technologies to have access to it like that workstation sitting right next to you, when in reality, it could be 1,000 miles away.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a number of folks who have, whatever the situation was health-wise, that simply haven't been any place in over a year, and having something
Right.
like that absolutely is crucial. As we wrap up here, Ray, what is one thing that you wish that all the integrators, whether it's the design consultants or the systems engineers, knew or understood about KVM systems?
Really, I think just how far it's come, and again, how it's a very secure solution. The type of functionality that we can now offer with KVM, we have some exciting new features that have really just popped up in the last year. Some are completely unique to us, such as our 4K tile view. That's the ability to sit down at a single receiver, and instead of even toggling between your different systems, which was already great and an easy way to access all your infrastructure, let's say that you have a user that needs monitors 1 and 2 from system A, monitor 3 from system B, and then monitor 1 again from system C. you can now pull all 4 of those monitors up in a single view on one big 4K screen. And as you move your mouse and your keyboard, you'll actually be able to switch control from one system to the other just by moving your mouse through 4 virtual
Holy
screens.
cow.
Yeah, it's come a long way in the last couple of years. So again, IP KVM is not new, but what we can do with it with advanced compression, our low bit rates, have really made it where there's new functionality out there that a lot of people don't even know exist. We have a lot of integrators and partners that we work with that are highly familiar with KVM, but we start talking about what you can do today with KVM, and it's just eye-opening for all of them.
Well, yeah, what he just described was basically auto switching based on the placement of the mouse, right? And that's using the software that you were talking about earlier too.
Right. That uses Extio Central Manager, does all the logic for you. Lets you set up templates, so you can also at a click of a button switch to a second layout. So if you have a completely different set of equipment that you want to be able to quickly toggle over and see 4 different monitors completely, you can set it up where you have 2 at the same time. So you could have 2 4K screens doing tile view, and now you have 8 monitors. Now, whether those 8 monitors come from the exact same, couple of transmitters that are just a couple of workstations, or that's 8 different workstations, it does not matter. The user experience is that you sit down at your station and you have the ability to work on the entire infrastructure, without having to actually even toggle between systems.
Good night. All right. Well, Ray Lacey, I appreciate your time. If somebody wants to connect with you or learn more about Matrox and the IP KVM, how do they do that?
Yeah, if you're interested about finding out more about these solutions, you can reach out to us at matrox.com/demoxto3 to request a demonstration and get in touch. And you can also find us on LinkedIn at @MatroxVideo.
All right. Thank you, Ray. Thank you so much. For us, for SCN, you can go by our website, avnetwork.com. That's avnetwork.com. Find more videos like this, as well as all the latest AV news and information. All that and more at avnetwork.com. avnetwork.com.